Pennsylvania Auditor General Tim DeFoor releasing numbers that are raising concerns about how cyber charter schools are being funded, even calling for a major reform. Our Philip Ward spoke with one of our state representatives about the issue and has more.
In an audit looking at sources of cyber charter schools' revenue, expenditures, and their financial position, Pennsylvania Auditor General Tim DeFoor is calling for major reform in how the schools are being funded. State Representative Bob Mursky, an educator by trade, agrees with DeFoor's assessment and said the expenses for running a cyber charter school are lower than running a brick and mortar.
You don't have a gas bill, you don't have an electric bill, and there's more students per teacher. So your student-teacher ratio is higher in a cyber charter than in a traditional school. So what's ended up happening is they've been getting the same amount of money, and they have these huge reserves because they're not spending the same amount of money.
The audit looked at 5 different cyber charter schools between the years of 2020 and 2023 and found that the schools increased their revenue from $473 million in the 2019-2020 fiscal year to $898 million in the 2022 to 2023 fiscal year. And while they did so legally, DeFoor is calling for action from both the governor and the General Assembly.
One of the things that we can do is look at through actuarials, finding an appropriate rate for cyber charter schools. I think the other thing that's important is to make sure that everybody's on a level playing field when it comes to educational outcomes, that they're being judged on the same scale as our brick and mortar schools, and making sure that the accountability piece is there. And the third thing that I think is important is this is taxpayer money, so when it's going into reserves at tens and hundreds of millions of dollars, that should be looked at, and that needs to be returned to the taxpayer or spent on the children where it's supposed to be spent. That's the whole point of taxpayer money for education, is to spend it on the kids, not to put it in the bank.
Philip Ward, Erie News Now.
And DeFoor recommended that the governor, Josh Shapiro, should appoint a task force to review the funding formula, and the General Assembly should act within 6 months of the task force's report to facilitate the enactment of legislation.